All right, hey everybody. It looks like we're live. Today is Friday, the 13th, May 13th. You're hanging out with my community manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. As always, you can hang out with us at our Twitter chat that's going on at hashtag CMGR Hangout, where I know a bunch of you are right now. Hey, what's up, guys? So if you love what we're talking about today, or you have an idea for a future topic, or you want to be on the show, please head over to our website at www.mycmgr.com. Click on participate, fill out the form. That's Sherry and I will get back to you. It's really your ideas, your topics, your connections that keep this community going each week. So what do we have for you today? Well, we all work in community here, so let's be honest. We all have haters. However, according to Jay Bear, who's with us today, in his book Hug Your Haters, haters are not your problem. Ignoring them is. And so we're going to jump right into things after a short introduction. I'm going to start today. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Brew, the Director of Awesome with BTC Revolutions, and co-producer here with Sherry. So, hey, everybody.
Hey everybody, I'm Sherry. I co-produce CMGR Hangout with Brew, as well as am the community manager over at Magento, which is an e-commerce platform.
Hi guys, Kristen Cardos. I'm here on Fridays with my community manager crew, moderating the Twitter chat, and I also get to work with Jay Bear and his team at Convince and Convert.
Hey guys, it's Brock. I'm Amplify at Amplify Your Biz and community manager for Mushfire, and it's been a while, so I'm stoked about this.
And I am Jay Bear. Thanks very much for having me. Delighted to be on my community manager. So great to be with all of you, and of course, Kristen, who is our community manager, who gets the unenviable task of doing my community management on a day-by-day, hour-by-hour basis. Thanks very much. And the book looks like this.
Boom. Awesome. Well, so let's just kind of jump in for everybody on this first question here, and just address this right away. Like, why should you embrace complaints? What are some of the important reasons?
Yeah. So the subtitle of the book is how to embrace complaints and keep your customers. And let me tell you a little story before we get into that. So when I wrote this book, well, here's why I wrote this book at all. So in our work at Convince and Convert, we do a lot of consulting for big brands around social strategy and content strategy and all that jazz. Well, people kept asking me, well, hey, what's the relationship between social customer care and community management? Or who should manage our social customer care channel? Should it be the marketing team or the customer service team? Or what's the relationship between telephone customer support and social media care? Or who should be responsible for pulling out insights from customer chatter and social media? Like all these kind of questions around convergence and process and operations. And I'm like, man, if these big companies are asking me these questions, you think about what medium-sized and smaller companies are faced with, they've got to be completely confused. And so I thought, geez, I kind of took a step back and I thought, here's the big thing that nobody's paying attention to. Customer service and community management, as a consequence, are being disrupted in the exact same ways and for the exact same reasons that marketing has been disrupted. It's just that, Brew, there's like 500 books about marketing disruption, including 4 by me. There's now 1 book about customer service disruption. Like, nobody talks about customer service because it's not sexy, but it is incredibly important. And so I thought, there's got to be a lesson in here. There's got to be a book. And so my thesis was originally that speed is the killer app, right? That the key to being great at customer service now, the key to having terrific customer experience through community, etc., is by being faster than the other guys. And I thought, well, one of the problems with customer service books is that they're typically filled with anecdotes and stories. And that's fine. It's instructive and illustrative, but if I'm going to go out and tell people that what they think about customer service is all wrong, it can't just be Jay says that it's all wrong. Like that, you got to have more ornaments on the Christmas tree. So I worked with Edison Research, a huge attitude collection firm. Tom Webster is their vice president and probably the person that is best known in the social media world in that brand. And we spent a shit ton of money on a massive study of the science of complaint. Who complains, where they complain, why they complain, how. And what I found out was that speed isn't actually the most important thing. So the title of this book was originally going to be Under an Hour, because the thesis was that you have to respond to complaints in less than an hour, otherwise don't bother. Turns out, when we did the research, we found that that's not true. Speed is important, but the most important thing is answering at all, because a third of all customer complaints are never, ever, ever answered. Never. And the overwhelming majority of those are online, in social media, discussion boards and forums, ratings, and review sites. And I was like, holy cow. You would never just not answer the phone 33% of the time. You would never just delete 33% of your emails. But somehow, because it's online, it's become permissible to just be like, fuck it, right? It's crazy. So we decided to study this and put real math around it. So when you ask the question, why should you embrace complaints, there's two reasons. One, you actually make money. Because if you answer a customer complaint, it increases customer advocacy every time. And when you don't answer a customer complaint, it decreases customer advocacy, right? It makes a bad situation worse. When you answer a complaint, it keeps the customer 70% of the time. 7 out of 10 customers who complain, if you answer, it doesn't even matter what you say. If you answer at all, you will keep that customer. So that has huge potential, of course, at scale. And then the other reason you should embrace complaints is that the most overrated thing in the world is praise. Praise is the most overrated thing in the world, because when people say, oh, your company's great at this, your company's great at that, it feels good, but you don't learn anything. You already know what you're good at. What makes you a better company, in fact, what makes you a better person, is negative feedback and criticism. So what smart companies do is they want customers to complain, because then they can do something about it.
Oh, that's interesting. I remember an early customer service job where my manager told me, he's like, no, this is great because people always remember when you fix the problem, but they rarely remember when you do a good job.
Nobody's like, hey, I turned on my light switch and the lights came on. Woo! High five, right? But if my power went out and then my power was restored in 5 minutes, you would actually, that has an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember we had someone on from Yelp, like probably a couple of years ago, and they were talking about, even after all their years working with Yelp, that if a company doesn't have any negative reviews, they're actually more skeptical than if they're all positive.
We talked about that in the book, actually, that you want, this idea that you want to have all 5 stars is totally misguided. Because when that happens, people are like, this has got to be fake. This has got to be all their cousins. So some negative reviews are really good for 2 reasons. 1, because it will identify problems that you probably genuinely have. But 2, just from a persuasive standpoint, 4.2 is actually more persuasive than 5.0, which I know sounds totally counterintuitive, but it's true.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think it's important, too, to always take that mindset, especially in community, to step back and not view it as a personal attack, but instead view it as an opportunity to learn.
It's so easy to do that too, right? I mean, it's just it's a natural human reaction. Like, especially for community managers who are so invested in whatever it is that they're representing. When somebody has negative feedback, it feels like somebody is telling you that your baby is ugly, and that is not a great feeling. And actually, we talked to psychiatrists in the book. One of my favorite parts. And we said, hey, what happens when you get confronted with negativity? And they're like, oh, your whole brain chemistry changes. Like, your temperature goes up and you get flush, and your heart rate increases, and you totally go on tilt in a very real way psychologically. And that's why sometimes you see community managers or social media customer service peeps or whatever, somebody has something negative to say and they come back with something even more negative, and they kind of get into this snarky war. And that's not good. It feels good to get into that, to match fire with fire, but it's super counterproductive.
Yeah, for sure. And I think sometimes, I don't know if you encountered this in your research too, sometimes it moves beyond the taking it personal, and then it's almost like you have this fear of responding to, oh my God, if I say something, are they going to is it just going to make it worse, or do I make it better, especially when you're responding to those complaints.
And I think the advice that we put out there in the book is that even though that can be troublesome and difficult, you should always respond. You should respond to everybody. Every complaint, every channel, every time, even trolls, even haters, even psychos, at least once. because it goes on record, right? It shows the audience, shows your community that you're not picking and choosing, that you're here to answer everybody. Now, you don't get into a tit for tat, you don't get into some kind of crazy back and forth flame war. And I want to make sure I make this point. I'm not suggesting that the customer is always right, because they're not. Some customers are stupid and they're wrong and they're trying to hijack you and they're just douchey and there's a lot of times when customers are not right. But every customer should be heard. Not necessarily because that customer deserves to be heard, but because if you're a community manager, the message you send to the community when you answer everybody is incredibly powerful, and the research in the book proves it to be so.
For sure. You mentioned trolls, psychos, whatever, but in your book you talk about like 2 types of haters.
Mm-hmm.
How did you kind of identify like different types of haters, and how does that look?
There's 2 main types, but then a third type. And so what happened in the research, we sort of analyzed the data, and we found that there's two big different groups, and we call them in the book off-stage haters and on-stage haters. Off-stage haters are called that because they complain in private, typically with legacy tools like phone and email would be most common. Those peeps are a little bit older, obviously a little less social media savvy, etc. The on-stage haters are called on-stage because they complain in public, right? So those are the people who complain to you on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. They also are the people who leave Yelp reviews, TripAdvisor reviews, or whatever ratings and review sites matter for your business, and the people who tend to participate in boards and forums, right? Sort of old school community. So those on-stage haters, a little younger, although not dramatically so, a little younger, certainly more social media savvy, more likely to have a smartphone, not by much, but more likely. So the demographic differences between off-stage and on-stage are apparent. It shows in the research, but they're not significant. They're not meaningful. The big difference, and this is a key finding, is what they expect. So the people who complain on the phone and email, they expect an answer. 90% of the time, when somebody complains on the phone or email, they expect to hear back. And I'm sure that's true for everybody, right? Who's a professional community manager or just a professional human being. If you call a business, like, you expect them to call you back at some point. If you email a business, you expect them to email you back at some point. It's just kind of how business has evolved. But the people who complain on stage in social and places like that don't necessarily expect a response. Only about half the time do those audiences anticipate that a business will get back to them at all, for 2 reasons. One, lots of businesses, nobody probably watching here, but lots of businesses do not respond to customers in social or Yelp or TripAdvisor, etc. Certainly not all customers, and in some cases 0 customers. And so people have not been trained to expect a response in social the same way they've been trained to expect a response in email. But the second reason is that a lot of those people who complain in public don't even necessarily expect businesses to get back to them, because they're not really talking to the business, they're just talking about the business. And so what happens, Facebook's a common scenario, Twitter too, somebody posts something negative about a business. I had an experience just a couple days ago with a hotel brand that starts with the letter H, and it's not Hyatt. And I did a whole Snapchat about it, and I knew they weren't going to find it, and so it wasn't necessarily like, hey, solve this problem. I was just griping. What you really look for in that scenario, what I was looking for, is group empathy. What you want is people to say, oh, that totally sucks. I had the same experience. I hate those guys. Like, you want your friends to join you in your pain. And this is an enormous opportunity, because when businesses can find those circumstances where people are not complaining at the business but about the business, and then jump into that conversation in a good way that all professional community managers know how to do, it has a massive impact on customers. Massive. So when you answer just one complaint in social discussion boards, review sites, it can increase customer advocacy by 25%. 25% advocacy, likelihood of promoting. It's massive. So that's the key lesson for a lot of businesses, is to look harder and answer the people who are talking about you, not necessarily at you.
I love that. I kind of, I think sometimes people, even brands they like, or let's say not hate, that's when you're not directing it right at that brand to complain. You're just sort of looking for a little empathy from your friends. Yeah, that's
Yep.
so true.
And then they jump in on that, you're like, holy cow, these guys are like superpower.
Right. Wow, they're listening. Yeah.
Yeah. It's unexpected listening. Expected. And look, all advocacy is based on expectation. So when you expect something to happen and that thing happens, you turn on the light switch, as we mentioned a moment ago. You're like, all right. But if you don't expect a business to answer and they do answer, it blows people's minds and wins their hearts, which is the job of the community manager.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you're answering them in places they don't expect you to be,
Right.
like review sites that are like super low key, or even on like a public post on Facebook or something that like is not tagging you, but you saw it or the community manager found it. That's like that amount that like the person responding like, holy crap, how did you guys see this? I didn't even email you, anything like that. So it's huge.
Yeah, there's I talked about Tom Webster who did the research for the book, he and his firm. I have a story in there about JetBlue and him. And so he was on a JetBlue flight from North Carolina to Boston, and he was sitting on the exit row window seat. And on the flight, the plane got super hot, like the actual fuselage of the plane got so hot, it was like hot to the touch. And he's like, that seems suspicious. And he had in-air Wi-Fi, so he tweeted it. He's like, hey, JetBlue, I'm not sure why this plane is so hot to the touch, but that seems weird. Didn't mention the flight number. It was one of those things. He wasn't really talking at them. He wasn't really complaining. It was more of a mention, that kind of thing. So he lands. 45 minutes after he lands, he gets a call on his cell phone from the JetBlue vice president of operations. So in the back end, right, they saw his tweet, figured out what his actual name is because his Twitter handle isn't his name, figured out based on the passenger manifest what flight he was on, figured out what seat he was in, contacted the operations group, pulled his cell phone number out of his frequent flyer account, gave it to the ops VP, and had them call him. All of that happened in 45 minutes. Went from Twitter to the operations center to a human being to a cell phone. I mean, that's like some crystal ball shit, right? I mean, that's where people are like, wow, you guys are on top of it.
Hey, Jay, if you don't mind, I'm going to bring in a question here that we had over on Twitter. David Pepper, thanks for hanging out with us, David. David asks, are there certain words never to use when we responding to customer complaints?
That's a super great question. I should write Kristen, take this note. We should provide that as a free guide in the new course that we're building, the Keep Your Customers course, which is a companion to the book, which launches July 1st. It'll be at keepyourcustomerscourse.com, which is just parked for now, but it's on the way. We should create a whole list of words you should never use. That's a super good idea. I will credit Dave for that. But I don't have the list fully articulated because I just came up with that idea in the last sentence. However, I would never use the words fault. I would never use the words wrong. I would never use the word policy. And Kristen, write those down because I'm making this ebook in real time. And I would never and I would never be afraid to use the word sorry. We have a whole part in the book about brands, especially big brands, who actually instruct their personnel to never apologize,
right?
Because there's
never
this belief
say sorry.
There's this belief amongst draconian legal professionals that if you apologize, it somehow takes liability for the issue. And I was like, that can't be true. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm like, that's got to be just sort of hiding in plain sight. And so I actually went out and talked to some intellectual property lawyers and said, so what I'm hearing is that if you say you're sorry, then your company's liable. And they're like, no, that's totally bullshit. That's ridiculous. And so we have debunked that myth inside the pages of Hug Your Haters.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
But Dave, I'll get back to you with a larger list.
Yeah, I always thought that was very weird. Like, well, what do you mean we can't? We have to show empathy here. This is
right. More than ever.
Yeah,
Yes.
of course we're going to say we're sorry. This is not,
and one of the reasons we really have to show empathy online for online community management is increasingly people will contact us in social after they've already had a bad experience off stage, right? So they called and it was too long on hold, or they emailed and it took too long to get an email back. And so now you're dealing with somebody who's twice pissed, right? Whatever it is that you did wrong the first time, and then they didn't have a good experience with your legacy customer service. And so now they're kind of going to social to kind of raise the stakes, like last resort, Hail Mary pass. And then when you don't put empathy into the equation, that's really dangerous, because now they're just writing off the whole brand.
I have a question on, I guess kind of the method of the complaint. So one of the things, especially from the service-based industry and restaurants, what we try to do is if we see that kind of real-time online complaint, we address it right there. But then our goal is to always try to say, hey, did you talk to the manager, right? Because we assume they might still be there, and we assume that they're just bitching publicly versus dealing with it. Do you think that there's a better advocacy rate by them talking to the manager right there versus people online, or did anything like that show up in your studies?
We didn't test that piece of it because you get too small of an N to actually draw statistically valid conclusions, and the reason the N is so small is that the internet and smartphones have made us all massively passive aggressive. And so I did a whole Snapchat on this the other day. My new Snapchat series is called Bear in the Woods, where I do a series of snaps on a particular topic, and one of them was about that exact question, where I was in a hotel, different hotel, and there's a letter on the desk when I walked in from the manager, and it said, "Thanks so much for being here at the whatever kind of hotel that was, a Hyatt," and he said, "Hey, here's my personal cell phone number. Contact me anytime you want about anything." And I was like, well, that's unusual. I don't see that very often, and I appreciate that level of accountability, right? But here's the challenge. Nobody will call him. Nobody will call him unless your room is on fire or filled with rats. Nobody's going to call him, because the issue is not, do people want to complain? The issue is that people want to complain without any interpersonal friction. The reason social media complaints are so popular is that you can do it without any friction in your own head, because you can lob bombs on a keyboard from afar, which is way simpler than actually walking up to somebody and saying, "My soup is cold." It's much easier to say "my soup is cold" on a Yelp review or a tweet while you're still in the restaurant than it is to get up and confront somebody. And I got to tell you, this trend is going to get way more pervasive, because my kids are terrible, and they're in high school. My kids are in high school. They're terrible at walking up and talking to people. I send my son, who's 14, to go get popcorn at the movies, and he's like weirded out about that, like asking for popcorn. I'm like, well, what if you had an app where you could get popcorn sent to your seat without talking to a human being? He's like, oh yeah, I'd use that all the time. So no one's going to call that general manager, because having to call puts the onus and the friction and the sort of psychological, like, oh, this is going to be uncomfortable, on me. Whereas if I can do it via SMS, so what I said in my Bear in the Woods is, what that manager needs to do is rewrite the letter, which says, "Send me a text message at any time at," and he would get way more participation. So of course it's preferable, Brew, if somebody walks up to the manager while they're in the restaurant, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah, good point. All right, I'm going to roll us into our next question here, which talks about the complaints, where and why. So how can we understand who is actually complaining, and where they are and why they are? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's where we sort of get into that on-stage versus off-stage scenario today. Now, this is across the whole country. All of your results may vary considerably, because it does vary by business type. But if you look at all businesses across the U.S., about 60% of all complaints are off-stage, phone and email. 40% are on-stage, social, review sites, discussion boards, and forums. So today, nationally, it's still a little bit more legacy than social, but of course that's going to change very quickly for the reasons we just talked about, and young people have no desire to make a phone call or send an email, for that matter. So if your company still calls it a call center, you're going to have to rename that pretty soon, because people are not going to call anymore, not for a while. So The other issue is that even within social, we think about Twitter as the place that people use for social media customer service, right? There's dedicated Twitter help accounts, things like that. I mean, that's a fairly common bias. But the research found that 70% of all customer complaints about businesses occur within social media on Facebook, and Twitter 17%. Now, a lot, as Barak mentioned, or at least alluded to, a lot of the complaints on Facebook are not public, right? It's on your personal page, and so a brand can't find it or can't find it very easily. But if you just look at the number of complaints and where they're logged, Facebook overwhelmingly much larger than Twitter.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that from the community management side. I mean, it's some days you feel like, oh yeah, Facebook, that's negativity land, and Twitter is where we go and bond with the customers. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting that and I would say that wasn't the case a couple years ago.
No, yeah, exactly.
It was maybe the opposite, right? Where Facebook was like the cheerleader, and Twitter was the very specific kind of help desk.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. And now it's definitely the place where people are just going to gripe, because it's real easy. They come to your wall and leave that complaint, you know.
Yeah, and then you're like, well, should we delete this, or should we, ban those guys, or all this other stuff.
Yeah, well, and I'm even surprised, like you post a picture of food, from a page, and it's like, it generally draws out the complaints of everyone who had a bad experience with that food item, or went the other day.
You call that a banana?
Yeah. So, So question number 4 is customer service a spectator sport? If so, explain. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, increasingly, absolutely, because of this shift from offstage to onstage. And when somebody complains onstage, social, Yelp, whatever, discussion board, there are tens or hundreds or thousands, or in some cases tens of thousands of people are going to see that, are going to see how you handled it, or if you didn't handle it, if you didn't respond at all. And as you guys know better than most, there's no atomic half-life on a Yelp review or a discussion board post. Social's a little different story because of the way the timeline works. But if somebody leaves a Yelp review, a TripAdvisor review, and you don't answer it, that can be pulled up in a Google search 4 years later, right? It happens constantly. So this is why businesses need to invest more in community management and in customer service, because the economic impact of the spectators, in most cases, vastly supersedes the economic impact of the actual customer to whom you're speaking. All the people looking on are either current customers, potential customers, or both. And they are watching with their metaphorical bowl of popcorn how you handle this interaction. And that has a big impact on your downstream business. And so, look, the reason customer service is so under-resourced in most businesses is that historically it wasn't a spectator sport. You were talking to somebody face-to-face or via a letter in the mail or on the phone or email. So if you piss that person off, yeah, you might lose that customer. They might tell some friends, but how many people does that guy really know? There's no massive public economic impact to being terrible at customer service, and now there is.
So I think that I 100% buy into that, as far as simple customer service responses, or addressing smaller complaints, or when you can quickly resolve an issue. But what do you think? My belief is that especially for something that might have to go on and on, or maybe there's it's where you might even consider this crisis level, that it's best to not make that a spectator sport. Obviously, acknowledge the fact online so everyone can see that, hey, we're taking care of this. But try to get that offline as soon as possible.
Yes.
Where you can hear the tone of empathy on the phone and all of that, and give it that personal touch. I mean, would you say that?
Yeah,
that's
I think
okay?
you should respond to everybody in public at least once.
Got it.
Right, because they chose that venue, so you should respect their venue choice. You respond in public at least once, and then in most cases, unless you have already resolved it, then you try to flip it over to private, and that could be private Facebook message, it could be a DM, it could be phone or email. It depends on the issue and your business and your policies, but you always start in public and then try to flip it private. But I do think it's important that if you're going to try and channel shift somebody from public to private, you do so because it's beneficial to them, not necessarily because it's beneficial to you. And it's really easy to see with a difference when you can see businesses are trying to like, hey, let's sweep this under the rug. Let's talk about this on the phone, not out here in front of everybody. That is very obvious to the spectators and doesn't look great for the brand. And so if you can genuinely say to the customer, especially in regulated industries, look, we can't talk about this here. I can't talk about your medical issues on our public wall. It's against the law. We should talk about this on the phone. So those circumstances have a little easier time of it.
Got it. I think I actually see some more questions from Twitter came in, but I didn't get them queued up yet, so I'm going to jump us into question 5 while I queue those up, which is, what obstacles do we encounter when trying to provide great customer service or great service?
Well, there's a lot of them. I think most of them you guys already know. It's not having enough resources. It's not being able to find not listening hard enough to find those indirect mentions. It's stuff that you guys know because this is what you do for a living. I think the biggest one is cultural, right? Is companies, have historically for generations, right, looked at customer service as essentially a necessary evil. Right? They haven't looked at customer service as the new marketing, which is what it is. They've looked at it as something we got to do because we have products and services. And so, I think a way to dimensionalize that with numbers is that each year worldwide, businesses spend about $500 billion on marketing and about $9 billion on customer service. Now, that's a huge difference, right? And it doesn't really make a lot of sense because I think everybody knows that it actually is more rational to try and keep the customers you've already earned than have to constantly go back and get new customers over and over and over. Right? It just makes financial sense, but we don't actually run businesses that way. Like, we know it makes sense, right? But we don't actually put our money where our mouth is. And so partially it's because customer service hasn't been a spectator sport in the past. But the biggest obstacle to being great at it is just having a culture that says this is going to be how we are better than our competitors. Our products may be just as good, our pricing may be just as good, but if we have better customer service and everybody knows it, that is a competitive advantage. And some businesses want to embrace that, and others simply aren't ready to do it yet.
It's interesting because it's almost like when you have great salespeople, you don't have to be necessarily all that good at producing the product. From in a service industry, I think the same is true from customer service, right? Is I've definitely, I think the experience that you have with the brand, it makes the food taste better, it makes the product feel better. You're more willing to forgive flaws in the actual service or product that you have if you've had this incredible customer experience.
Well, and even if that customer experience wasn't perfect, fascinating research, we didn't do it for the book, but it's cited in the book, is that customers who have issues that are successfully resolved become more loyal than customers that never had a problem. Think about that. People who had a problem that was successfully resolved are more loyal than people who never had a problem, which makes me think, how can I create a problem for everybody that I know we can solve, right? It's like, there's an idea. Yeah, planned outage. So it's a very powerful psychology, because what happens is it's almost like Stockholm Syndrome. It's like, we're in this together, right? And these guys fixed it, Yes.
That's fascinating. I'm going to jump us over to a couple Twitter questions real quick. So Dewey, thanks for hanging out with us. Dewey asks, how do you please a customer who thinks they're always right, even when they are absolutely wrong?
I mean, sometimes you can't, and that's where you have to realize that the goal is to go on record with the spectators. You can't please every customer, and not every customer is going to be a successful interaction. It's just not humanly possible. I would be cautious about saying that customers are wrong, however, because in many cases I find that it's not that they're wrong, it's that there's just a really big difference in expectations or a difference in understanding. Like, a lot of times we don't communicate about our businesses to customers as well as we think we do. What I hear from businesses a lot, and I'm not suggesting that's the case in your scenario, but just as an illustration, there's a story in the book about a business called Square Cow Movers, and Square Cow is a moving business in Texas. The moving business is really hard, right? Because you're packing up people's stuff, and it's very fraught emotionally. It's a people are on edge, and it's hard, and you're like concerned they're going to break your stuff, and it's just people are in a fragile state, and they were having lots of complaints. They're a good company, but they were getting lots of complaints on Yelp and email and phone and social, and what they realized, they did actually a whole analysis of their customer complaints, and what they realized was what they were actually doing what they were supposed to do, which is that the customers didn't totally understand like the sequence of events or the timing of events or policies or procedures. It was a lack of understanding. It was a lack of information that was causing these issues. So what they did, their owner, Wade Lombard, is he went through and looked at all the different ways that they communicate to customers and all the different places and formats that they communicate, and they doubled the amount of communication. They said, okay, here's how we communicate today. We're going to increase communication by 100%. And after they did that, customer satisfaction went way up, because what they realized is that over-communication is a myth. So if you're getting customers that are unhappy, and in some cases customers that are consistently unhappy, in some cases it's not that you're not delivering the goods, it's that they just think something's going to happen that you had never planned to happen. And that doesn't mean the customer's wrong, it means that you don't communicate enough.
Got it. Let me jump in. I think we have one more question that came in from David again. And David asks, hey, can you detect a radioactive complainer?
I mean, certainly you would think that some of the language they use on first contact would tend to lead you to believe that they are a troll. Twitter says that they have some technology that can identify trolls easily. There's some other discussion board software being worked on that can sort of flag trollish behavior really early and kind of look at patterns of behavior. But I would say if you just accept the premise that you answer everybody, even trolls, once and then move on, then you don't have to guess. You don't have to pick and choose. You're not having to do detective work. You don't have to be like CSI community manager. Just answer everybody once and then keep on rolling. What is the deal with this phone? Excuse me a second.
Someone is expecting an answer from you, Jay.
Yes, this is an Offstage Hater. Is what this is. It's probably somebody like looking for it's always like the political fundraising right now. So.
Yes. I'm really disappointed that we don't get to be a CSI community manager. So I'm not gonna lie.
You could do a new show.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've already asked this, but what obstacles do we encounter when trying to provide great service?
Yeah, we talked about that, mostly cultural, right? It's mostly people just not thinking that great service is worth the investment.
Okay.
Because
Sorry,
that's ultimately
I got a little derailed on some GIFs on Twitter.
That's okay. Hey, I hear you. And that's what it comes down to, right? Being great at customer service requires resources, right? It takes way more time and effort to do great community than people who don't do community for a living know. Like people are like, oh well, how hard is it? You're just answering some tweets. It's like, yeah, bro, it's actually there's more to it than that. And being great at it requires like real time, real investment in time and resources, and most companies just aren't there yet.
Yeah, I just want to jump on out real quick and say we're talking about over-communication is a myth. One of the biggest obstacles is when we take things offline and direct people to customer service, and then customer service drops the ball. So over-communication between your departments and the public-facing and then the people who are supposed to be handling it, that's so important too, because then the complaint comes back online of being like, oh, crap, we did our job, but then there was like miscommunication between the silos and the departments. So
yeah, and I actually we talked about that in the book in the operations section, Brack, about hey, maybe ultimately it doesn't make sense to have a customer service department and a kind of social care or community management department. Like really, maybe everybody should be on the same team, and we should figure out a way to make that happen. And some businesses do it that way, others definitely don't. So there's lots of evidence for both models, but just from a logistics standpoint, having different departments and different managers and different compensation plans and different goals and objectives is actually kind of ludicrous. Like if you just like parachuted in from Mars and you're like, hey, tell me how customer service gets handled, and you said, well, here's the deal. If somebody calls or emails, one team handles it, but if they use Twitter, a totally different group of people in a different part of the world handle. Like, wait, what? Seriously? You know, it doesn't. I mean, logically, it doesn't make sense. It's that way because of the way the channels have evolved. But ultimately, we're going to have some integration there, because that's exactly what happens. In fact, sometimes the community manager types are, of course, delivering better service in social than you get from legacy channels. And then what happens is you're just training your customers to go to social media first, which may or may not be a desired outcome. And I'm sure everybody here not only has delivered on those goods, but also has experienced it as an individual. We're like, yeah, the guys on the phone told me one thing, but then I tweeted about it and I got way better service. Well, the next time, I'm not going to use the phone. I'm going to cut out the middleman. So it's kind of like mom said this and then dad said this, right? That's what happens all the time.
Yep, and the cool uncle said that.
Yeah, which is not good for the brand, right? To have inconsistent application of customer service policies, and that inconsistency is based on channel, is really bad. But happens every minute of every day.
Cool. So I know in your book you have entire chapters dedicated to responding differently based on different types of haters. But
Yeah.
maybe if you could just kind of go through like the onstage and offstage that we talked about, and just kind of explain how we can react differently based on those situations.
Yeah, I mean, certainly empathy, incredibly important in both sides. We talked about that earlier. You don't really know what somebody's story is. They could be having the worst day of their lives, and you just kind of got caught up in the crossfire. So empathy should always be the default state. Unification of data, we just touched on that a second ago, that one of the real challenges is that the phone and email guys are working from one database and social is working from a different database. Happens constantly. That drives people crazy. Being fast, really important. Obviously, in social, our research found that 40% of the people who complain in social expect a response in an hour, which is pretty fast. But being fast offline is just as important. In fact, 44 hours is the average length of time it takes businesses to reply to an email now. That's almost 2 days. Like, that's a long time. That's a really long time. And so what happens is that people send an email, takes too long to get an email back, they think they're getting blown off, and so then they go to Facebook and like, what's the deal? Right now they're twice pissed. So that happens. And the number one factor in customer service success and kind of customer love on phone is speed, right? So hold time is the number one factor. Hold time is more important than accuracy. It's more important than friendliness. It's more important than anything. So quite literally, I don't recommend this, but the data show that you could lie to customers quickly and be better off than if you told them the truth slowly. So something to think about. Don't do that, but I'm just saying.
Don't do that, but.
But if you want to, the data supports it.
That's funny. So in all this studying, what does the future of customer service look like to you?
Man, it's happening right now. It's crazy. There's a bunch of different trends. So community-based support, which is very much in your world, not only just community management as a discipline, but also support communities, right? So kind of get satisfaction and those kind of places where people go to get support. That's a huge one. Self-service, a massive trend, so that we create enough content, enough information that customers can solve their own problems without having to call or email or tweet. That's huge. Purpose-based customer service-based apps, right? So there's lots of them out there where you can use an app to actually call the business for you or contact the company. That has a lot of potential. But I think the most transformative trend is going to be chatbots. Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, all the chatbot stuff is going to be huge, and you're going to have a lot of bot-based community management, bot-based customer service rolling out just in the next 3 to 6 months, and it's going to change the game for every single person watching right now.
That's really interesting. Brock, do you have any thoughts on future customer service?
I think that as much as I dislike the idea of the chatbots, I think that Jay is right, especially with the epidemic of like the research that he was talking about with the email and how long it takes. I mean, something as simple as like there's this festival I was supposed to go to next week and I'm trying to get an answer and I've sent them the email and tweeted them Facebook and haven't gotten anything. I think that automated, and I think if we're going to be progressing, educating, like I said, all departments and really creating a culture of customer services first, and customer service happens literally every minute of the day, is super important, and having the over communication within the departments is going to be important, but I don't know how that's going to roll out and how, like, unless something major happens and something really, really bad happens, companies aren't inclined to really put in the time and effort for that, and they stretch out their resources, and it really starts showing. And I don't know if the chatbots are going to be, I mean, they may be the reality, but I don't know if they're going to be the helpful reality. I don't know if they're going to harm or help.
I know. That's what I think too.
Yeah, like it's probably going to be the reality with especially Facebook and the Facebook rolling out the Facebook Messenger for chat and everything that they're doing. But I don't think it's, in my mind, I don't know if it'll be super helpful. It's going to be the same as like going to a website and that chat thing popping up and nobody really paying attention to it. So. But
yeah, it's interesting because there's starting to be like some e-commerce trends with chat as well, which I think is it's just interesting how many like different things are popping up in chat now.
Yeah, I feel like we're going back to the forums, like kind of going back to basics, but trying to do it in a way that's hasn't really been tested yet. So it's going to be interesting to see how that different companies approach that with that. Venue. Wow, words are hard, guys.
Yeah, the interaction pattern is very similar to the old school forums. It's just that it's happening one-on-one in chat without people watching. And what's interesting about the chatbot trend is that it takes some of what we talked about in Hug Your Haters and amplifies it, but it takes away, in some cases, the spectator support part of it. Right, so you don't have onlookers in your chat the same way that you do in public Facebook or Yelp, etc. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what that dynamic turns into.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I have a really random question for us. So ever since I was putting this Hangout together, I've had Taylor Swift's "Shake It Off" stuck in my head. And yes. I sort of jokingly, but not really jokingly, told Brew he had to sing it because he loves karaoke. And then Jen over on Twitter also posted the GIF, "Haters Gonna Hate," and asked if anyone else was thinking it. And then something else you said sparked Justin Bieber's "Is It Too Late Now to Say Sorry?" With the timing and everything. So my question for
Kristen,
you
we got to make a Spotify playlist. Hug Your Hater Spotify playlist.
My question for you guys is what other songs come to mind with this topic, with haters or with customer service?
Okay, here's the funny thing, though. So "Shake It Off" is the walk-on, walk-off stage music that I used for the presentation for Hug Your Haters.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It's built into the deck. It's actually built into the presentation.
What's that one song? What's that one song? I could hear this from the if you don't take care of the customer service issue fast enough, it's like it's too late to apologize. It's too late.
Oh yeah.
Well, there's actually a song. It's a semi-rap song called "Hug Your Haters."
Oh, nice.
As it turns out, and I'm like, we got to work together. We got to do something.
Well, you guys,
Timbaland.
Yeah.
Apologize by Timbaland. That's what we're talking about.
And you guys can't forget the classic "I Can't Get No Satisfaction."
Oh, yes. Well done. Well done.
Can't forget about that.
Nice.
Well done.
Nice.
All right, how about everybody on Twitter submit your songs?
Yes, submit your songs.
Playlist.
Submit your songs and make sure we know who it's from. And we'll publish a blog post on convinceandconvert.com, which soon will have its 10 millionth lifetime visitor, if you can believe that. And we'll do a blog post and we'll credit everybody. And then we'll have a Spotify playlist that you can download to the official Community Manager Hug Your Haters Spotify.
Love it. Love it.
Nice. There's some homework for you, Kristen. Have fun.
She loves it when I give her things to do in real time, like
ebooks
on songs. Words not to use, Spotify
It's all
playlist.
a teamwork already, Jay. I got you.
Yeah, it's good.
Teamwork.
It's good like that. She rused the day she ever came to work with us. She's like, damn it, that was stupid.
Really, that's the opposite of what I hear.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's not true. It's her fault.
I'm going to get out of here. I've got to see why somebody's calling me every 5 seconds, and I've got a client thing in a couple minutes. So I'm going to bail.
Yeah,
All
thanks
right,
for joining us,
sounds
Jay.
good.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great weekend.
Appreciate it. Take
Bye,
care, everybody.
Jay.
Thanks. Get the book.
Get the book.
Bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
Kristen, if you could real quick just throw in there for Jay, since he's popping out, where people can find the book and get more information.
Yeah, I will tweet that out. It's probably the Amazon link is best, and I'll tweet it out. But I do want to put in another blurb, and I'll link this as well. But Jay's actually doing a little bit of a contest, and it actually ends on Sunday. But if you don't have the book already, then you're not going to be able to do this. But if you do have the book and you haven't left a review on Amazon yet, if you leave one before Sunday or by Sunday, you might win something from Jay. So I will tweet out that information while other people besides me talk.
Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Cool. We do not have a topic yet for next week. I think I have some emails somewhere to go through. Actually, I had no idea, but I mean specifically about this. So if you have suggestions, please feel free to send them my way. We are chatting in 2 weeks with Patrick O'Keefe and Bill Johnston about, shoot, I completely forgot. I will tweet that out. We were talking something awesome with them that they were chatting about on Facebook the other day, and I totally snagged. So that's all I've got, unless you guys have something else.
No, we could totally end early. I mean, we have a client that actually is so awesome. Whenever our meeting ends early, she says that we're under budget for the meeting, which I think is really, really clever. But yeah, hey, we came in.
Or if you don't want to end early, I can just say things and you guys can listen to the lawnmower and weed eater that are currently going on outside.
Why not?
Yeah, maybe next time.
So hey, if it's nice where you are, get outdoors for 7 minutes, take a big, nice breath of fresh air, and then rock back to your keyboards, guys.
Also, the topic, I looked it up, is purpose. So looking at purpose in online communities.
Ooh, purpose.
And that's in 2 weeks?
Yep.
Sweet.
In 2 weeks, what's next week?
I just said I don't know.
We don't know yet.
Ooh. That's fine.
I think some people have emailed me, but feel free to send over some other suggestions as well, and I'll look through them. Hit me up on Twitter, even if that's easier.
And I would also like to shout out to Patrick and Jen, who were complimenting my beard. Thank you. It's been it's been a process. I had to go through that awkward stage with it. I don't know if I'm going to grow out long or just shave it all off every morning. I'm not sure. But thanks for the beard.
As long as you don't change your hair.
No. I mean, why would you change that?
You can't perfect perfection, Kristen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beards, whatever, but just the hair needs to stay.
Yeah. All right, cool.
All
right, guys. Have a great weekend.
Guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.